So this is a great just slide, and I'm going to go through a couple of them from Rachel Langle. She is a speech language pathologist out of Michigan, and she posted these on social media. Robust AAC allows someone to express a full range of emotions. We need to remember that they need to be able to do, if we have students with complex communication needs, they need to be able to do more than request crackers, go to the bathroom, and have a drink. We need to start offering words and teaching, as Cassie said, teaching what those words mean and how they can use them. So we can model.
Jump in there real quick. I think that's so important. Because oftentimes I've even heard where we've had teachers request students to not have certain words because they use them too much. But we would never do that to anybody else. We would teach when those words are appropriate. So I love that point. Sorry, I just had to jump in there. I love that.
That's fine. We need to model disgust, because sometimes we need to say, oh, that's gross, or that smells bad. We need to be able to talk about how it's normal to feel worry, anxiety, doubt. And does their AAC system give them a way to say that? I'm not sure. I feel nervous. I have butterflies in my stomach. Talking about anger. We all get angry. It's part of our human experience. My kids will tell you I get angry all the time. And I have choice words, and they know which ones they can repeat and which ones they can't. But we need to be able to give those students those words to express their anger and frustration. And many people, our students that don't have those words, are resorting to behavior to show how they feel. And I think the other big thing to remember is that we need to honor those words too. So even if they say, no, I don't want to do that, we expect compliance a lot, and we need to show them the power of their words and acknowledge. I think about circle time and how many classrooms I've sat in, and all the kids go up to the interactive whiteboard, or they go around and they share how they're feeling. And how many times do you feel, or do you hear, oh, you're happy, or they don't come up and make a choice, and the automatic choice is usually happy. Well, let's try to really give them words that express things other than happy. They don't have to be happy all the time. They can be angry, they can be tired, they can be hungry. We need to model AAC for a variety of reasons, including to express disappointment and sadness. There are times where we all feel sad, and that's okay. It's okay to be unhappy. It's okay to be disappointed that you can't do something that you want, but you have to be able to have the words to express that.
And I think it's important that if you don't have the words, you still may be expressing that. But that's where we're going to have people misinterpreting what you're showing as a negative behavior.
Yeah, I can't tell you how many times my husband just looks at me and says, "What's wrong with you? Why are you so grumpy?" And I'm not grumpy. I'm fine. I'm just cleaning the kitchen or something, but we have to have that dialogue and that conversation back and forth. He can't just make that assumption either. Mm-hmm. So we're going to take another few minutes to check in and wondering which communication or which emotion do you have difficulty communicating? And then, so you can go through, if there's one that's not on here, feel free to just write an emotion that you have difficulty communicating. And then what does that look like when you can't communicate that feeling?
Jennifer and Cassie, there's a statement in the chat you're probably going to want to read.
I was just looking at that. I think after we're done with the check-in, we'll definitely go to that. I think if I were going to go with one, I'd go with F. I'd go with the anger. I'm not great at communicating anger. I probably show it on my face, but I'm not really great at talking about it, especially in the moment. Like later on, I might be, but I'm someone that needs to process that before I can explain it. So I do know that, sometimes people will see it on my face and like wonder, like my family, like what's wrong? And I can't find the words for that one as quickly as others.
I agree. I'm someone who, when I get angry, I sort of bottle it all up. And then eventually it just keeps building and building and building and then explodes and eventually comes out.
Then you look like that guy.
Yeah, exactly. Pretty much.
So it looks like a lot of people, it's fear, it's sadness, it's disgust. And I feel like for a lot of our students, like that fear and sadness are things they're not good at communicating either. I mean, and even just any student trying to put into words those things. Okay, while you guys are still putting that in chat, we did have a question come in chat that says, if a student doesn't like anything they do the first time, do you continually acknowledge the I don't want to do this? If you know the third time they approach it, they'll love it. Or do you want it acknowledged and first then to happen? Jennifer, you go for this one.
I think about this in terms, I mean, I think you can look at it in multiple ways, but for me, we have this rule at our house that, and I have very good eaters, you have to try something like 10 times before you can say that you don't like it. And it's not like we make you eat a humongous amount of whatever it is you don't like, but you have to eat one Brussels sprout, or you have to eat, one spoonful of peas. And it has been something that has really worked with my kids, and they know that they'll try to get away with not eating it, but they know, and they've tried so many things so many times that they've developed a taste for that it has had a positive outcome. But I also, on the other hand, want to respect when individuals don't like something. And so I think we do need to acknowledge that. So I think acknowledging it is good. And maybe we're not going to make them do something they don't like for an entire half an hour, but can we try it once or twice? And then we can do a preferred activity that maybe is more motivating. So I guess that's how I would look at it.
I think I would go with you. We actually had that in our house. We had to have 3 bites of food, one for your teeth, one for your tongue, and one to see if your tummy agreed. You always had to have 3 bites. By then she'd eaten most of her vegetable anyway. But from a school standpoint, I really think that question depends on what it is you're working on. If you're working on a student making choices and learning communication, I feel like it's really important to acknowledge the no, because if they're learning that their words have power and they have a choice, at that point, honoring that no, and then offering it again later, and then offering it again later, and keep bringing it back around is going to be super important. If, on the other hand, you have a student who can communicate no, can communicate, more decently their choices, then at that point, bringing in some form of rule, like Jennifer just said, or like my example, in our classroom, I know you don't want to, you've said no, but in our classroom, you have to try it once, right? For 2 minutes, because that's our rule. The rule is you have to try it twice, but then you don't have to keep doing it because you don't want to. So acknowledging what they're telling you, but there's a classroom rule that you still do need to do this much of it, even if you're saying, no, you don't want to. So really, it depends on the student and where they're at. If it's really learning to communicate and saying no, absolutely, I feel like you need to honor that, because otherwise they're going to learn their no doesn't matter. But if you do have a classroom rule for your students that, you can tell me you don't want to, but I still need you to do this piece of it, I feel like then you can kind of follow through with that and keep prompting.
Yeah, and I went back to this readiness to learn slide because we have to think about the task too and the difficulty of the task. So if we're teaching something at that instructional level that is difficult, we don't want that student to be so challenged and so frustrated that they're going to completely shut down or have tons of behaviors. So I think implementing some of those supports, I think like you mentioned, first then, or motivator cards where we're going to, earn 3 stars, and then when you get that, you get to pick your highly preferred task. And also, I think it's important to involve the student thinking about that universal design for learning and allowing them some voice and choice in the activity as much as you can. So if it's something that they don't prefer doing, can they at least pick the topic that they want to write about, or can they pick what they want to read about, so that you are helping to develop that interest and that motivation, while still working on maybe the task that's more challenging for them. And then again, using some of those supports so that those visual things are in place to help them through when something's really challenging.
I think in chat too, as we're starting to move on here and talking about independence and some of the tools that we can use, I think there were a couple great comments in the chat talking about the difference between like, don't like, and the concept of all done. You know, if you want to stop, you might say, I don't like, and that makes things stop. So using other words like I'm finished, different vocabulary there. And I think that was a great point. So some different things, we're going to kind of, look here at some different things that we can do in our classrooms with our students to kind of help support communication and expected behaviors. So one of the things for independence, anytime that we can add in visuals, using some technology, some routines, some AAC, what can we do to help really support the students who are having a hard time communicating their emotions? So we've spent the first part of this really talking about kind of the underlying things, but we want to also give you a few ideas that you can try. Now, these things might not all work for every student every time, but we want to kind of give you some tools.
I just wanted to jump in, Cassie, and say, when we are talking about behaviors, at least when it comes to AAC and communication devices, it's really important to work on those skills, identifying emotions, communicating what's needed when the student isn't in that explosive state. So when I'm not going to shove a communication device in that student's face and say, now tell me how you're feeling as they are raging around the room, or tell me what you need, they're not in a position that they can communicate at that time. So it's really important to work on these skills and utilize these tools when they are well regulated. When we think about that readiness to learn and all of their needs are met, so that they can be in a place that's optimal for learning. And we can even take opportunities when maybe another student's having some behaviors, and we can model those words like, oh, Billy looks sad. Look, he's crying. What do you think he wants? And getting some of that empathy going as well, but using that to model some of that language so that as they start to escalate, before they get to that explosive state, you have some tools in place for them to communicate.